Yes, friends, I welcome you to this video. So today we want to look at index numbers, indices. So we find that an index number is a measure of relative change in a variable or group of variables in relation to time, a graphical location, or other characteristics such as income. So we've got some types of indices. For example, you find that we have price indices, we have quantity indices, we have value indices, as we're going to see. So types of index numbers. So there are three major types of index numbers, and these include, so we have price index numbers. So you find that price index relatives, they basically look at the changes in commodity prices. They try to look at the changes in commodity prices. And then the other one is quantity index numbers. So quantity index numbers look at the changes in commodity quantities, basically in quantities demanded of a commodity in 1 year or in one period against the quantity demanded in another period, that is current year as well as the base year. And then we have another type, and that is value index numbers. So value index numbers measure the changes in the total value of goods produced and sold. So basically, value is obtained as a product of price times quantity. Value is a product of price and quantity. So meaning that this shows the value of a commodity in one period against the value of that same commodity in another period. So index numbers are classified into two. So classification of index numbers. So index numbers are basically classified into two major groups, and that is the weighted indices as well as the unweighted indices as well as the weighted index numbers. So we can try to go through the unweighted index numbers. So we find that when we talk about the unweighted index numbers, these are indices that do not consider the relative importance of the commodity for which they are being computed. And we find that index numbers have also got, unweighted index numbers have also got types. So they are categorized into three, that is simple index numbers or simple index relatives. So you find that simple index numbers basically look at the index relatives of a single commodity. So they relate to the index number of a single commodity. For example, if you want to find the index number of beans, then that is a simple index number if it is beans alone. Then we have simple aggregate index numbers. So now, as you can, this one now looks at, as you see the word aggregate, it looks at a group of commodities. So for it to consider as index numbers of a group of commodities, for example, you may have milk, bread, matoke, so then you find the index numbers of all of them combined. So that is simple aggregate index numbers. And the third one is the simple average index numbers. So we are going to look at each of these types as well as examples falling under each of them. So we are going to begin by looking at simple index numbers or simple index relatives. And the definition here says that this is a ratio. This is a ratio of the value of one variable of a single commodity, that is price, quantity, or value, in a given year to its value in another period known as the base year. So you find that when we talk about simple index numbers, they can still further be divided into three categories, and that is they can either be divided into price relatives, quantity relatives, or value relatives, where you find that price relatives only deal with prices of commodities, quantity relatives only deal with quantities or volumes demanded of a commodity, and then the value relatives look at value of a commodity. So now they are telling us that simple index numbers can be subdivided into price relatives. So these are index numbers expressed as a ratio of the price of a single commodity in a given period to its price in another period. So we obtain price relatives by dividing the price of a commodity in the current year by against or divided by the price of that same commodity in another year or the previous year, which we call the base period. So a price relative is given by that formula. Price relative equals to Pn over Po, where Pn represents the current year price and Po represents the base year price. So when we talk about current year and base year, let's say we have 2 years, 2015 and 2016. So we'd find that 2016 would be considered to be the current year and then 2015 to be the base year. So that is how we find the price relatives. Then we can as well we also have quantity relatives. Now this one relates to quantities, or we use information regarding quantities or units demanded or produced. So these are index numbers expressed as a ratio of the quantity of a single commodity in a given period to its quantity in another period, which is the base period. So you find that we get the quantity relative by dividing the current year quantity, or by dividing the current year quantity by the base year quantity. That is Qn over Qo, where Qn represents the current year quantity and then Qo represents the base year quantity. And then another type of simple index numbers is value relatives. Now this one relates to values of these commodities. We've already said that value is obtained as a product of price and quantity. So values, these are index numbers expressed as a ratio of the value of a single commodity in a given period to its value in another period. So you find that value index numbers or value relatives are given by that formula: Pn times Qn over Po times Qo multiplied by 100. So here times 100 times 100. So that is, we normally express them as a percentage or as percentages, but we can as well express them as ratios. If you don't multiply them by 100, then you express them as ratios, but the better way is to express them as a percentage. So we have an example to look at. Let's try to look at an example to see how we can practically compute these index numbers. So the example says the table below shows prices, that is price per kg of sugar from 2008 to 2011. So sugar is a single commodity. So in this case we have 4 years. We have that is from 2008 to 2012. We have 5 years. So the question says, using 2008 as the base year, calculate the price relatives for sugar from 2008 to 2012. So we are going to try and find the price relatives of these years, of this commodity in those respective years. So let's try to find that. So we want to compute we're going to compute the price relatives of sugar from 2008 to 2012. So remember, we said that the price relatives are given as, or price index numbers under simple index numbers given by this formula, Pn over P2, Pn over Po times 100. So now we shall have a simple table. So we are already given the base year as 2008. However, if you happen not to be given the specific base year to use, you can use the oldest year as your base year to solve the question. So let's have a simple table. Shall have the year, then the prices and the price relatives. So we have year, then prices, sugar price, shillings, and then the price relatives. So that is how we are going to find the price indices. So let's try to enter the values into our table. So we do have the years. We have 2008, 2008, 2009, 2010, 2011, 2012. Then the respective prices, we have 800, we have 1200, we have 1300, 1700, 2500. So now those are the prices we do have. Now we are going to find the price relative simply dividing the current year price against the base year price per year. So now we begin with 2008. So now in 2008, given that it will be the current year at that same time, it will be the base year. So meaning we simply divide its price of 800 by again that 800, because if it is 2008, its price will act as the current year as well as the base year price. So so we shall have So we shall have 800, which is the price in 2008, divided by 800. Still it will be the base year, times 100. So this will give us 100%. So then we move on to the next year. So now when we come to 2009, the current year price becomes the price of 2009, and the base year price remains the price of 2008. So meaning we shall have 1200 divided by the base year price, which is 800, times 100. So what do we get? So let's have our calculator and check out. 1200 divided by 800 times 100, we get 150%. So sometimes they may ask you to make a comment or to comment on the price index you've got. So you find that whenever the price index you get happens to be higher than 100 or greater than 100, then you talk about an increase. Then in case it happens to be less than 100, talk about a decrease. For example, in this case we have a price relative of 150. What does this show? It shows that there was a 50% increment in the prices of sugar in 2009, taking 2008 as the base year. If it was less than 100, you talk about a decrease. So now we go to 2010. So 2010, the price of 2010 becomes the current year price, that is 1300, and then the price of 2008 remains the base year price, and this gives us 1300 divided by 800 times 100, that is 162.5%. So still this shows excuse me, this still shows an increase in commodity prices in those 2 years. Then we come to 2011. So when it comes to 2011, the price in 2011 becomes the current year price, and that is 1,700. The price of 28 remains the base year price times 100. We get 1,700 divided by 800 times 100. We get 212.5%. So that still shows an increment in the commodity price in 2011, taking 28 as the base period. Then we come to 2012. Now when we come to 2012, we do have the price of 2,500 as the current year price. So 2,500 divided by the base year price, which base year price is 800. Times 100, we get 312.5%. So when you try to observe this, you find that the price indices are increasing from 2008 per year up to 2012. So that is how we calculate price index numbers for single commodities or under simple index numbers.